Six are the walking ways, enigma, enemy, teachers, begat by precursor gods. Come we now, their creatures, embody splendor in your name, and wisdom in your features.
Six are the formulas to heaven by violence. Six are the walking ways, from enigma to enemy to teacher. Throughout the entire Elder Scrolls franchise, you will be hard-pressed to find a lore topic as essential, mysterious, and less talked about than the six walking ways. Here in this channel, we have talked about the six walking ways before. However, this was done sporadically throughout a 7.5-hour video. I think given how important they are, they deserve a video of their own. The six walking ways are steeped in real-life religious practices and beliefs. Even the concept of six walking ways is born from real-life religion. Despite this video will focus only on what is said about them in-game, without referencing any of the influences behind them, which is not much. It's not much at all. I'm also gonna use some out-of-game articles made by the person who wrote the six walking ways, just for extra context. This is something that has to be made clear. Everyone has some disagreement about anything from the name, traits, characteristics, and even order of the six walking ways. Yes, order does matter. We will disagree. The most consistent party that provides information about the six walking ways is Vivek. Do you know how bad things are when your most reliable and consistent source is Vivek? Let me put it to you this way. The six walking ways page on the unofficial Elder Scrolls website keeps changing every month. Sometimes several times per month. This is how it's supposed to be. We are not meant to have 100% of the puzzle, just enough pieces to make it a really good puzzle. There is a common misconception in the community that Vivek is the only person in the universe that knows about this topic. This is wrong. Although they aren't exactly common known knowledge, or even well understood for that matter, a lot of people within the TES universe, from bards to crazed cultists to wood elf spinners, know of the six walking ways. But to know of something and to understand that something is a completely different story. And even those that don't know anything about them still interact with them in one way or another. Picture them kinda like quantum physics. Not everyone knows about them, the people that know about it hardly understand it, and even those that don't know anything about them still interact with them in one way or another. In this video, I will make a conscious attempt to explain these topics without mentioning concepts such as the wheel, the tower, or the Cotho. I want to make this video actually digestible and, dare I say, understandable for someone who's new into this. Also, I want to not be a broken record, and we have already talked about those things, and we will keep talking about them in future videos. So for now, I'll just give them a rest. So, what are the six walking ways? The six walking ways are methods by which one can gain Numantia, translated from Elnefex, the language of the elves, new law. They are ways by which one being can change their nature and become anything from a deity to another being to multiple beings or even nothing. By doing so, or even better, to do so, they transcend above all limitations of the TES universe and return to the first state of existence, before the first act was ever taken by Anu and Parome. In that state, no action has yet been taken. Therefore, the world can be altered through the possibilities that define it while it's in that state, as it forms into Nirn. Those who achieve such a state can reshape the world as they please, while still living within it and maintaining their sense of self. The walking ways are intertwined with one another, and it is never the case that possession of one of them makes the others unobtainable. In fact, it's quite the opposite, and experiencing one walking way oftentimes can unlock others, but we will talk about that with more details when we dissect each one. There are some terms that we have to explain here. Essential prerequisite to all walking ways is the concept of violence. Vivek is infamous for stating time and time again that the heavens can only be reached through violence. The heavens here does not refer to Arthurius. It refers to the first state of existence before Anu and Parome's interplay, but still confined within existence. Violence is the means by which one can achieve this state. The term violence here is more closely connected to terms like strife and struggle. All the walking ways require the undoing of the individual. Mankar Cameron takes this concept further, describing it as something that closely resembles torture sometimes. So why would anyone do this? There's no clear-cut reason as to why people choose these paths. Believe it or not, a lot of people follow them unconsciously, and those that follow them consciously oftentimes aren't even sure why they do it. Although the usual themes of wanting power and seeking to ascend keep popping up sometimes. The first entity that walked the 6 walking ways and walked all of them was Lorcan. Why he did it isn't confirmed, but that's definitely intentional, and we will see how different groups reacted to Lorcan's actions as we explore the 6 walking ways. Another thing before we start exploring each of the ways, the order of the 6 walking ways matters when it comes to understanding them. This is made further confusing by the fact that some walking ways are, in and of themselves, also split into 2 smaller parts. As said by Vivek, pure existence is only granted to the holy, which comes in a myriad of forms, half of them frightening and the other half divided into equal parts purposeless and assured. This might seem a bit confusing, but it really isn't. Both purposelessness, I hope that's a real word, and assurity still lie within the same walking path. It just splits. Another point I want to make about this video, as I was writing the script, different topics kept popping up, and those topics are later explained by other walking ways. So instead of repeating myself or telling people we're gonna talk about that later, I instead chose to talk about the walking ways in a different sequence. For example, as you're about to notice, I will talk about the 6th walking way first, because it's the most essential one, and you can't really talk about the other ones without talking about it first. And before we get into the walking ways, I want to say this video isn't a perfect guide. No such thing can exist. These are my observations on a topic that I find fascinating. Take it, if you will, as an invitation to view this franchise through different lenses, or come to your own conclusions. And without further ado, behold, a guide to becoming a god in the Elder Scrolls universe via the 6 walking ways. First, the 6th walking way. It might seem strange that I'm starting with the last walking way, but it is the first walking way ever conceived, and it was conceived before time and space were even shaped. When the gods that created Mundus decided to abandon their creation because of how much the process of constructing the world drained their powers, they made 2 proclamations on top of the Adamantine Tower. Proclamation number 1: the spirits that gave their powers to create the world will be free to choose for themselves if they want to stay or leave their creation. Proclamation number 2: the spirit that conceived the idea of constructing the mortal realm will be punished by having his heart stripped away from him and killed for his trickstery. That spirit goes by many names. The 2 main ones are the Elven Lorcan and the Imperial Shazar. For the rest of this video, and for the sake of clarity, he shall be referred to as Lorcan, but suspiciously, Lorcan was neither sorrowful nor angry about this decision. And when Oriol and Trinamak, 2 spirits that assisted in the creation of the world, killed Lorcan and ripped his heart from his chest, the heart talked to them and said this:
"This heart is the heart of the world, for one was made to satisfy the other."
So why did all of this happen? Why was Lorcan happy with all of this? Well, what if all of this was part of his plan from the start? This is the essence of the 6th walking way, the Scarab that transforms into the new man. Lorcan was willing to suffer, lose himself, his heart, and his divinity to gain something new, Numantia. Remember the formula to reach the heavens? Through violence, enigma to enemy to teacher. This is the beginning of this process. All 6 of the walking ways are shaped by Lorcan in one way or another. The story of the 6 walking ways is, at least essentially, Lorcan's story. This is why the last walking way needs to be discussed first. Now that's good and all, but let's get a bit more specific. What is the process of the Scarab that transforms into the new man? The 6th path is Lorcan's journey from an offshoot of Sithis to Talos, the god beyond time and space, a god that is way stronger than any Daedra or Aedra, and if anything, everyone is trying to copy. From the different factions during Daggerfall to Dagoth Ur, Mankar Cameron, Vivek, he's the universal teacher, and he became this way by first being everyone's enemy. There is an allegory to be made here, and it's a bit of a gross one. Scarabs use dung to both eat and feed their young. Something that is, by all means, useless to everyone is paramount to a scarab. No one in their right mind would have their heart stripped away from their chest, get thrown into a hostile world, to be hated by half the factions in this game for the sake of hopefully, at some point, becoming something better. But that is exactly what Lorkhan did, in that he was violent. 2 important points. Talos is the product of all 6 of the walking ways, not just the process of being cast down. What we are referring to here specifically is the process of lowering yourself in order to find usefulness in what others deem vile and painful. Vivek constantly points out this dichotomy every time he talks about Lorkhan. You probably know quote-unquote Boethiah's speech during Sermon 10, where she calls Lorkhan the Framemaker, the Scarab, and then praises him for creating the world and being motivated even after his torment. This rejection of comfort for the sake of something else is constantly seen all throughout the sermons. In another quote from Sermon 4, Vivek says this: "The slave labor of the senses is as selfish as polar ice, and worsens when energies are spent on a life others regard as fortunate. To be a ruling king, I will have to suffer much that cannot be suffered." Essentially, he is rejecting the easy road, the road that others regard as fortunate, for the sake of something else. That something, however, cannot be obtained without suffering. Mankar Cameron is a bit more complex when it comes to his perception of Lorkhan. On one hand, he seems to at least acknowledge him, and he also understands his cause, saying Scarab e Orbex, which means the Scarab is the Orbis. But on the other hand, he has an almost utilitarian approach towards Lorkhan, saying eat or bleed dry the gun for long, and gain that small wheel that led them to walk the path of Godhead at the first. Spit out or burn to the side that which made them delay. Essentially, get what you can from Lorkhan, the gone forlorn, and then gain his ambition, but then toss aside whatever causes him to suffer. Mankar is a can of worms all by himself, and he is well due for his own 4-hour deep dive, when I, of course, gain the mental capacity to deal with his nonsense. But you get the point. All that was just the first point. The second point is this. I feel like the community seems to view Lorkhan as this good and benevolent figure that did all of this because she wanted everyone to ascend and become gods and what have you. And well, this is a theory, but let's read just a bit between the lines. So far, Lorkhan has been praised by Vivek, Mankar Cameron, and maybe Boethiah. These aren't the people you want praising you. As a matter of fact, if these people are praising you, then that probably means that you've done something at least morally dubious. Sothasil, someone who is by all means a more honest and kind figure than all of these characters, has nothing good to say about Lorkhan. When Anu broke itself, it did so to understand its nature. In its sundering, the values that swam in its vastness thought to know themselves. The Et Adagirs gave themselves many names and set their will to building. Alas, they heeded the counsel of Lorkhan and forgot the face of Anu. They thought themselves distinct and whole, and so many hands assembled the world, each with separate intention and selfish purpose. The Nern of many paths was the result, a broken and leaking steamship that leads ever windward. This does not sound like praising to me. Lorkhan is simply change. Just that. He isn't good or evil, or anything in between. He simply wants to see change happen. In the book Sithis, we see this aspect of Lorkhan as someone who exists to cause change. Although we should approach this book with some caution because of this line. It might not be the entire truth, but it's got a point. Nowhere is this more visible by the fact that even after he did become Talos, he just stopped caring about anything. He can do whatever he wants, and the most he does is saying hello to the Nerevarine, lament on how the Empire has stopped any meaningful change, from actually occurring and deleting the jungles of Cyrodiil as a last thank you. He isn't good or bad. He doesn't care if people worship him, love him, hate him. All he cares about is change occurring. As a last note to the sixth way, Vivek says this: each of the aspects of the Amsivi then rose up together, combining as one, and showed the world the sixth path. Ayem took from the star its fire, Set took from it its mystery, and Vec took from it its feet. This can be interpreted in two different ways. Either it's Vivek doing a sick propaganda move and saying, yeah, we're using the heart of Lorcan to gain our powers, what of it? Or he can be saying that at that moment, the Amsivi have walked exactly like Lorcan and are basically at the end of their journey, as they are about to become one god, like Talos, by completing the way of the Scarab. Personally, I lean towards the first theory because so far in the sermon, he hasn't addressed the plot hole of his divinity being a direct product of the heart, but to each their own. Oh, and also, it is hinted by one source from Exile to Exodus that Malakath and his followers also follow this walking path, and they certainly fit the criteria, but they did so unwillingly, so they only get half the points. I want to give a sentence for each of the walking ways so they can become abundantly clear. The sixth walking way, the way of the Scarab, is the process of reducing yourself to gain something new that others deem useless and painful, but is actually very useful. Asterisk, violence. From the sixth, I want to jump over to the second walking way because it directly follows up from the sixth. The second walking way is the Psijic Endeavor. The purpose of the Psijic Endeavor, like all walking ways, is to transcend mortal boundaries. It is a return to the first brush of Anuparome, where stasis and change created possibility. Basically everything we said already, but worded differently. This might be something that confuses people. A lot of cultures and people say the same things, but with different words. I prefer calling this process Numantia because it's only one word instead of a sentence, and it's used by Mankar Cameron, who also gives a lot of other terms and information about the six walking ways. So what is the Psijic Endeavor? The basis for the teachings of Prophet Veloth, founder of present-day Morrowind and father of Dunmeric culture. Veloth describes the Psijic Endeavor as a process of glorious apotheosis, where time itself is bent inwards and outwards into a shape that is always new. Veloth and his followers left the Somerset Isles for an unknown land, knowing fully well that they will suffer, die, and face conflict wherever they went. This is the element of violence. I think it's best to think of the Psijic Endeavor as defiance of the laws that created the world. It rejects the adamantine laws of the first spirits and tells people to seek something new, away from the boundaries of the mortal world. While Veloth is given credit for establishing the anti-laws that govern the Psijic Endeavor, this process has its origins in the teachings of the Black Hands Mephala, Boethia, Azura, Trinimac, and of course Lorcan, through that lord's association with Siege. It should be noted here, just to make things abundantly clear, that the teachings of the three good Daedra alone are not what makes up the Psijic Endeavor, hence why Trinimac and Lorcan are also needed. The three good Daedra have followers all across Tamriel. Something special is going on here. After all, the three good Daedra simply told Veloth and his followers that the Aedra are not to be trusted, and that the three good Daedra are who they should worship, along with a few other things, and the embracing of a mentality that is more aligned with Sithis, or rather Paromes. Sithis is the siege, by the way. The Psijic Endeavor can be understood as defiance towards concepts like stasis and order, which is what the three good Daedra showed Veloth and his followers. Another thing that has to be said, the Psijic Endeavor and the Psijic Order have nothing to do with each other. Both share the name Psijic because of their affiliation with Sithis. In that way, Psijic Endeavor literally translates to the endeavor of change, which is why the Dark Elves are also called the Changed Ones. But how does this connect to Lorcan? Remember, he is also a part of the equation here. What examples of the Psijic Endeavor exist today? The world you stand on is said to be the first attempt at CHIM. It is also, admittedly, the most famous. That it was choreographed by Lorcan and ultimately failed is well documented. But whether or not that failure was intentional is still disputed. The entire TES universe is a product of Lorcan defying the concept of order, and if we do decide to believe the book called Sithis, this was Oriel's order. Oh boy, I am sure that no elven fanatics will ever get mad at this. And that's just about it for this one. When Vivek talks about the Psijic Endeavor, he says the following: I give you an ancient road, tempered with the second walking way. Your hands must be huge, to wield any sword the size of an ancient road. Yet he who is of right stature may irritate the sun with only a stick. Mankar Cameron never talks about the Psijic Endeavor directly. However, everything he does is centered around this concept of defying order. I want to take a moment and focus on that concept. The concept of standing up against something that is greater than you, yet is completely stagnant, and still being able to win against it. It is an interesting concept. Vivek just says it in the verse I just read, and Veloth saw it with his own eyes. It is insane to me though how closely aligned Mankan Cameron's and Talos's ideas are about the Septim Empire and Akatosha's order as a whole. They both completely agree that it has kept people stagnant and has stopped any meaningful change from actually occurring. Cameron says that Dragon's Blood has hidden ascension in 6,000 years of ethereal labyrinth, which is Arena, which they yet deny is oathbound. It's like Cameron and Talos both represent two sides of the same coin. But anyway, I have yapped for way too long. The Psijic Endeavor, in one sentence, is define established order by embracing change and struggle. From the second walking way, we have to now talk about the fifth. CHIM. It's called CHIM. Imagine making a huge video in which this thing is essential and then learning that you have been pronouncing it wrong this whole time. CHIM is the first walking way that we shall talk about that is split into two. It has a purposeless and an assured side, and I am here to tell you that CHIM is the most confusing part of this video. I said I'm not using any complicated terms. In the simplest way that I can put it, CHIM is both a state of being, as in meditation, or a way to exist, and a concept. Both of these terms adhere to the name, the secret syllable of royalty. One makes the other. Every walking way leads to CHIM, but CHIM is in and of itself a concept which leads to the state. So, what is CHIM? CHIM is the ideal, or sometimes also called true, way of being. The reason why it takes two forms is because there is an ideal state of being about oneself and an ideal state of being about the entire Orbis, which is the entire universe of the Elder Scrolls. If one has a true understanding of who they are, then they have CHIM. Vivek says that he learned this concept from Molag Bal after Vivek told Molag Bal his own true nature, which is Ae Aldadun Kartok Parome, which translates to something like this: I am the weapon and hands of Parome, to which Bal added another, CHIM, which is the secret syllable of royalty. At that moment, Vivek cemented his likeness as Mafala. He became his true and ideal self. He gained perfect knowledge of who he is, and in doing so, he gained perfect knowledge of the Orbis. When we next see Vivek in the next sermon, he talks to Nerevar about this concept, starting his talk by first saying the secret syllable of royalty, then breaking the illusion of individuality by saying that man is a temporal myth, and then explaining the entire structure of the Orbis. CHIM is something that exists both in the individual level and the universal level. I think I made a mistake in the bigger video about Vivek, so let me correct myself. The secret syllable of royalty is CHIM. It exists both in the universal level and the individual level. Accessing to one might give you access into the other. For Vivek, his ideal state of being is this: Ae Aldadun Kartok Padome. This is his CHIM. Through this, he can glimpse into the universal, since self and universal are inherently connected, hence why he is able to know the ideal form of the world. This is why CHIM can be gained through all the walking ways. This is how Mankar Cameron went from being a wood elf to an Altmer. He knew about CHIM on the individual level, but because of a variety of reasons, he could not obtain it on the universal level, hence why he could only change himself. He is quite a good example of how CHIM is obtained and how that process can cause suffering and violence. Offering myself to that daybreak allowed the girdle of grace to contain me. When my voice returned, it spoke with another tongue. After 3 nights, I could speak fire, red ring, razor fed. I had glimpsed the path onto the garden, and knew that to inform others of its harbor, I had to first drown myself in search at sea. This is Mankar Cameron's ideal form of himself. He gained it through suffering and sought to tell others about it so that they may become as they wish to be, their own ideal forms. The tower touches all the mantles of heaven. I know. I said I wasn't gonna say anything about towers. I'm gonna make it very quick. The tower touches all the mantles of heaven, brother Noviets, and by its apex, one can be as he will. More, be as he was, yet change for all else on that path, for those that walk after. This is the third key of Numantia, and the secret of how mortals become makers, and makers back to mortals. Those who possess both aspects of CHIM can change the world as they wish, for they have fulfilled their journey and have entered the first state of existence, before Anu and Parome. Talos is a great example of that, and these words of Mankar Cameron directly reference his journey from maker to mortal, and then again from mortal to maker, but this time different. Talos is Lorcan. However, the original Lorcan was not as powerful as Talos. When talking about CHIM directly, Mankar gives the following example of Talos's universal power with CHIM. CHIM, those who know it, can reshape the land. Witness the home of the Red King, once jungled. So which one of the two is purposeless and which one is assured? The individual aspect of CHIM is assured. It validates oneself to himself. It forms an ego that is unbreakable. The universal aspect can be seen as purposeless. Just look at Talos. He isn't doing anything. He's sitting in a tavern by the Ghost Gate, looking at an 100% achievement bar, going, well, what now? This is, of course, maybe a bit of an overreach on my behalf, but it kinda makes sense and it explains a lot about Cameron and Vivek. You can also call it the true state of being instead of the ideal state of being, and there isn't much difference between the two. Again, it's one of those semantics things. I must say this as well, CHIM might seem unlimited in its power, but it's also inherently a limitation in and of itself, which is maybe a part of the reason why Talos seems a bit melancholic during Morrowind. About the fifth walking path, Vivek says this: late is the lover that comes to this by any other walking way than the fifth, which is the number of the limit of this world. This is the inherent problem with all of the walking ways. They lead to CHIM in one way or another. But what does CHIM lead to? There is an answer to this question, but I don't want to get too off topic. The TLDR is this: CHIM is the ideal state of being both on the individual level and the universal one. But just because it's an ideal state, that doesn't mean that it's not bound by limitations. They are different than the limitations of the Edada and the Black Seas of Oblivion, but still limited within existence. And this was the fifth walking way. How would I describe CHIM with only one sentence? Something like this: CHIM is the ideal state of being on both the individual and universal level. I said I wasn't gonna talk about real life influences, but in case you are struggling to understand this concept of ideal forms, check out Plato's ideas on this concept. He makes it a lot easier. Next up, I feel like there is some confusion in the room about walking ways being split into two, so let's go have a look at an example that makes this dichotomy crystal clear. Behold, the fourth walking way, the steps of the dead. The steps of the dead are a walking way by which one can change their nature by acting as someone who has died. From Tiber Septim himself, well, more accurately, by the guy who wrote Tiber Septim pretending to be Tiber Septim himself in an out-of-game document, the Stormcrown Mandate by way of the fourth, the Steps of the Dead. Mantling and Incarnation are separate roads. Do not mistake this. The latter is built from the cobbles of Dronebone Destiny. The former, walk like them until they must walk like you. Yeah, this is probably the easier one to understand and the one with the most examples to pick up from. The Steps of the Dead is a way by which one can become a different person or god by means of either acting like they did when they were alive or fulfilling a set of criteria set out by destiny or prophecy that makes one the incarnation of the deceased. The former is called mantling and the latter is called incarnation. Let's look a bit closer. During the events of Morrowind, it is a big point in that game that the main character isn't inherently the Nerevarine, but he can become the Nerevarine if he fulfills the Nerevarine prophecy set 7 trials. When he puts his hand to, that shall be done. What is left undone shall be done. First trial. On a certain day, to uncertain parents, incarnate, moon and star reborn. Second trial. Neither blight nor age can harm him. The curse of flesh before him flies. Third trial. In caverns dark, Azura's eye sees, and makes to shine the moon and star. Fourth trial. A stranger's voice unites the houses. 3 halls call him Hortator. Fifth trial. A stranger's hand unites the Velothi. 4 tribes call him Nerevarin. Sixth trial. He honors blood of the tribe unmourned. He eats their sin and is reborn. His mercy frees the cursed false gods, binds the broken, redeems the mad. The player character, however, isn't forced to do any of this. If they don't do so, they aren't the Nerevarin. They are whoever they want to be. These aren't things that the Nerevarin will do when he comes back. These are the criteria that makes one the Nerevarin, and in doing so, he becomes an incarnate of his predecessor. The player character in Morrowind will choose to do these things, which is why he is Nerevar reborn. By doing so, he also changes his own nature. It is, in a sense, a form of Numantia. The second method, mantling, refers to a process by which one being walks the exact same way as a dead being, and in doing so, it picks up the mantle of the dead being, becoming it. We see this happening letter for letter in the events of the Elder Scrolls Oblivion, where the hero of Kvatch becomes Sheogorath by picking up the mantle of the Protector of the Shivering Isles and the Lord of Madness, since the real Sheogorath dies and becomes Jigolag. Both of these processes require violence, as anyone who has played Morrowind or the Shivering Isles DLC can attest to. What is also interesting about this walking way is that, much like all walking ways, it revolves around the concept of change, but this time, it's change to go back to what already was. Vivek says this about it: the sage who is not an anvil, a conventional sentence and nothing more, by which I mean dead. The fourth walking way. Mankar Cameron talks about mantles a lot, but his writings warrant a more in-depth discussion, so this one is very simple. How exactly does it relate to Lorkhan though? Well, as Tiber said, this is how he manted. He picked up Lorkhan's mantle, and in doing so, he became Lorkhan Reborn. It's never made clear what this relation between the new and the older version is, and it doesn't have to because the older version is dead, so there is no actual interaction between them. The way it's presented, it doesn't seem like the new being has the memories of the original being. The Nerevarin, to my knowledge, didn't have the memories of the original Nerevar, so it seems that, at least in that way, they are split. I can't tell which one is the one without purpose and which one is the assured. The last note I want to make about the Steps of the Dead is that it's also called the enantiomorph, which means oppositionally shaped. Just like a pair of hands, they are the same, but oppositionally placed. Enantiomorph can be seen as just another way of saying Steps of the Dead. There are some theories regarding the enantiomorph and the 3 beings that make up Talos and their transformations with one another, but it gets confusing, contradicting, and if I'm being honest, unnecessary for this video. Maybe it deserves a smaller video in the future, because it's still quite interesting. So, how can we describe the Steps of the Dead in one sentence? The Steps of the Dead are a process by which one can gain Numantia by either picking up the mantle of someone who died, by walking like they did when they were alive, or by fulfilling a prophecy of someone who is dead and is said to come back if they fulfill a set of criteria set out by destiny. A bit wordy, but easy enough, I think. From the fourth, we move over to the third. Don't you love this order, by the way? It really makes things so much easier and less confusing. The Prolix Tower is the third walking way, and it is also split into 2. But first, what is Prolix? Prolix, using or containing too many words, tediously lengthy. Prolix also suggests unreasonable and tedious dwelling on details. Here it is again. Tower here just means an ideal, which, in the Elder Scrolls, a world of myth and magic, means that it is so real that it becomes dangerous. Prolix Tower is the way by which knowledge and perception define and shape reality. These are its two parts, perception and knowledge. It is the various magic abilities of speech and writing and all their comprehensions. Before we get into more details, for the sake of clarity, abilities such as the Thum, web spinners, and Dwemer tunnel magic aren't the entire Prolix Tower. They are but one of its manifestations. They are within the walking way. They are not the walking way. There is a web spinner in the capital of Valenwood in ESO that expands on how her magic interacts with the cosmos. And well, I've been talking for a while now, so I'm gonna let her take the mic for a while.
Perhaps I shall spin a tale for you, perhaps not. It all depends upon your temperament, doesn't it? To listen or to not.
What stories do you tell?
I do not spin in terms of whats, but rather in whens. The now of the songs that fill me consider the seas and skies, and that sea and sky beyond those of Mundus, Aetherius. So I may speak on any of these concerns, for now. Aetherius is the sea of light, the immortal plane, the origin of magic. Ifre sings not of Aetherius, but to it, weaving a song so beautiful that stars were compelled to dance and twinkle and sway. They still wink and blink in memory of that song.
How do the stars relate to Aetherius?
They are Aetherius. Rather, the sun and stars are holes pierced into the veil of night by Magnus and other spirits seeking to escape Nirn. These holes permit Aetherius's light to enter our world. From theirs to ours does magica trickle.
How do they move and twinkle across the sky then?
Well, consider this. As Oblivion is a realm composed of realms, so too is Aetherius a bright sea with many realms within. Each of these stars is a window into these realms, and as these realms move, so too do they move, or close like doors.
What realms do you mean?
Now, that is an enormous question that I cannot answer. Many souls of mortals become spirits of another sort in that place, and that is all I can say with any certainty. As difficult as it is to travel to Oblivion, it is far more to go to Aetherius.
What stories can you tell me about the sky?
The sky mirrors the sea, and the sea also reflects its mirror. Day, night, and the places between are the realm of the sky, as Ifre interpreted the time law Anuiel established within Nirn. Thus, the sky bridges time and nature, and measures both.
What does that mean?
Within each half of the sphere of reflection lies half of the potentialities of Nirn's way in any given moment. Each instant is a sea state or sky state. Each individual sees one or its other as weal or woe, and each moment can be turned on its side.
What does turning a moment on its side achieve?
Each moment so turned becomes an island in your path. For example, the Dwemer, united, had their way in Dwemeris. But one clan, Rorkin, the Wayward clan, struck anchor and sailed across the sky. Why do this? Mired in a sea, they sought the sky.
Creating an island is a good thing then?
Yes. Change is wrought in Nirn in 6 ways, and the turning of islands is one of these, often described by others in other terms. Of course, it is possible to acknowledge these ways without understanding them. To spin them is all I can do.
Tell me about the sea.
Ifre taught the birds to sing and the waves to lap against the beach. Through Ifre's song, he also gained sight perception of all that occurs within the sight of birds and the reflection of waters. And he echoes their songs and crashing waves.
Is there anything he doesn't hear or see?
Of course. He sees and hears nothing. For Ifre is now the earth bones, the frame upon which nature is laid and woven. His sight perception and song echo instead are loomed through his bones and woven into tapestries of song for we mortals to study.
How does this relate to the sea?
The sea is all-enclosing, the water that encircles all of Mundus. The birds call out that which occurs over land to the sea, which reflects and echoes that song. Through study of the sea's mystery, it is possible to interpret Ifre's song tapestry.
How would I do that?
You already do, as do all mortals. Your frame of perception of the world is your own bones, akin to the earth bones. It is as possible to see into your own future and world as it is to immerse the self in hysteria with no fear.
What does this mean?
To sing a law and then speak into the heart of that law, convincing it of a subtle error and how it must change its own self. This is how nature's course, its own sea, is shaped and reshaped over time. Such changes can affect the whole of Mundus.
Well, that was the Prolix Tower. She basically said everything. Yeah, so I basically made a small mistake in the Vivek video and said that the third walking way is the first and the first is the third. It was an easy mistake to make. The Dwemer did use both the third and the first walking way and they used them together. So all things considered, it was an easy thing to get wrong. And if I'm being honest, I'm more shocked that this was the only sizable mistake in that video. Well, that and the thief thing. The Prolix Tower has two aspects. Knowledge changes someone and makes them different. And the perceptions of people also change the world. And that's basically it. It's pretty easy. Let's look at some examples. And there is no greater example of how perception shapes reality than the example that Mankar Cameron gave. It is also, to my knowledge, the origin of the term Prolix. Oathbreakers beware, for their traitors run through the Nymic paths, runner dogs of Prolix gods. There are a bunch of terms in this sentence, but the only term we care about here is the term Prolix gods, which refers to the Aedra. The Aedra are shaped by perception. They have no concrete form, like the Daedra. Their forms are subject to the whims of the people that know them. Stendar, Istun, Strendar, and whatever other name he is given by the cultures that worship him. Based on that perception, he has different traits, appearances, and characteristics. Hermeus Mora also has a lot of different names, but he is not shaped by them. He is still the same eyeball we know and love. That is one half of the Prolix Tower. Perception shapes reality, even if done so unconsciously. Knowledge also shapes reality. This is a bit more of a yada obviously. All working ways require knowledge. Even the prerequisite to CHIM is the acquisition of knowledge. And yeah, that is true, but knowledge manifests itself in different ways. Parthenax notes this by saying that dragons fight each other using words as a form of philosophical debate, but they are actually still fighting each other.
There is nothing else but philosophy to Adova. It is no accident that we do battle with our Thum, our voices.
Web spinners manifest their knowledge of the world with their stories, and the Dwemer made powerful weapons that used sound, which got them deleted when they used them with the first walking way. Vivek says something very similar to the web spinner, most likely because the web spinner is referencing Vivek when he said, "The third walking path explores hysteria without fear. The efforts of madmen are a society of itself, but only if they are written. The wise may substitute one law for another, even into incoherence, and still say that he's working within a method. This is true of speech and extends to all scripture." Yeah, essentially what the web spinner said. Knowledge is an essential component for everything Lord did. There is also a scene in the Sermons of Vivek in which, to cut a long story short, Vivek tries to teach a group of his students, which he calls the Whirling School, knowledge of the world, and in doing so, he says this: "In this cloister, you have discovered one walking path, healed like a sword, but more quiescent. So etched it is that it has to be whispered to keep the tongue from bleeding, or its signs evacuate from their former meanings. Essentially, be careful with the knowledge you know. It is powerful, but it might also cause problems. Just a look at the Dwemer." Exactly, you can't. Despite this, or rather because of this, knowledge is the assuring part of this walking way. The perception is the purposeless part, since, in most cases, it has no actual end goal and is more so just a product of cultural comprehensions than an actual comprehensive way of ascending through violence. There is a theory in the community that Talos also used the perception of the people to cement himself as a god, and that's why the Thalmor want to ban his worship. I have a hard time believing that theory. Even if he did use that method, he's the strongest being in the setting now. I doubt you can just turn off his plug by banning his worship. Also, if that was indeed a sizable threat to him, he can just, snap his fingers and delete the Thalmor. And that was the Prolix Tower. How it relates to violence is pretty obvious, but if you want to put a #I'm14 and this is deep spin to it, you can say that both acquiring and having knowledge is painful and violent. The Prolix Tower, in one sentence, is this: knowledge and perception of reality shapes the orbis. I purposefully made this section larger than the other sections so that the Prolix Tower section of this video can be described in and of itself as a prolix section. Before we talk about the last walking way, we need to talk about the wrong walking path in a brief section. It's only been attempted and addressed once because it is the walking way of Dagoth Ur. Dagoth Ur reversed the script. Instead of using violence to reach the heavens, he assumed that he is already a god and tried using violence to enforce his divinity. That, Sir Dagoth Ur, is big wrong. As much as I like your voice, I can't verify the integrity of your practice. This is the essence of the false walking way. Dagoth Ur tried to build another Numidium, the Achillecan, and he would use it to spread his false divinity. When asked what he will do with the Heart of Lorcan, in his own dialogue, he says this: I will continue to draw divine power from the heart and distribute it to my kin and followers. I will continue to broadcast divine power upon the blight winds, so that it will touch each soul in Vardenfell, and then more broadly, across the waters to the rest of Morrowind and Tamriel. In time, every mortal in Tamriel shall feel the liberating contact with the divine. This, of course, would never lead to apotheosis. It would simply make everyone delusional. Maybe he could reach the Prolix Tower through this process, but even that theory is dubious, and he doesn't seem to be aiming for that either. He thinks that he is already God. It's interesting as well how Vivek advises no goodwill or benevolence towards Dagoth Ur, as if to say, please don't feed into his delusion. You're only gonna make it worse. There is an entire different realm of metaphysics relating to Dagoth Ur, but I'm trying to keep this video to stuff that only relates to the 6 walking ways. So just know that the reason why this is wrong is because he already assumes himself to be a god and misuses the concept of violence by using it to spread his idea of false divinity rather than using violence to gain actual divinity. And I think this is a pretty good sentence to describe the false walking way, so we'll stick with that. It is also the case that exactly because it's a false walking way, Lorcan has nothing to do with it. The last walking way that we are gonna talk about is also the first walking way, the Numidium. What is the Numidium? Well, we already know that Nu means new, so Numidium just means the new medium. Yep, it's that simple. A Numidium, as it is sometimes called, simply means a new medium. The Numidium, despite what you have seen during the events of Daggerfall, has a character and a personality. As Vivek puts it, it is a god covered in terror. Its original usage was to be an intermediary force, a medium between the divine, the Heart of Lorcan that is, and the Dwemer race. It carries the Dwemer's mentality about the world. In doing so, it vehemently resents the mortal world. It is an anti-creation. It embodies the mentality its makers wanted it to embody because they thought that it would allow them to ascend, if only they were able to tame it. That mentality is the extreme denial of the material world. Let me make it even more clear. Another name for the Numidium is the Prime Gestalt. The fact that I'm pronouncing Gestalt right is insane. Gestalt is a school of thought which states that the mind perceives objects as unified wholes, gestalts, rather than as collections of individual parts. The Numidium is an amalgamation of everything the Dwemer think the world is, powered by the heart that made the world. It does, however, have powers beyond just the metaphysical, as it is also a massive mecha. Violence is still violence, I guess. Let us microanalyze the Numidium a bit more. It is made up of 3 parts: the body of brass, the power source, and the activation tools. Now let's examine the instances where it failed, and the instances where it succeeded in causing Numantia. We all know how it failed the Dwemer during the Battle of Red Mountain. The brass body is the same in all instances. It more so represents the mentality of the Dwemer, that idea of what creation is to them, something that they hate and have to overcome. The power source was the Heart of Lorcan, the guy who instrumented the creation of the mortal world. The activation tools are the tools of Kagranach, which use tonal magic. You can picture this scene as the Dwemer forcing their mentality upon the world and trying to override existence itself, but it doesn't work. Their violence was wrong. They were not better than the world. They were just another part of it. Now let's examine the ascension of Talos. it mentions that different parts were being gathered, but we will assume that the body of the Numidium and the mentality of the god covered in terror remains the same. This time, we are using the Mandela, which is a soul gem made up of the souls of Wolfhearth, Enzor and Arctis. A reminder that Wolfhearth is a Shezarine, an avatar of the god Shezar, and Shezar is Lorcan, and Arctis is strongly connected with Magnus, who is the architect of creation. So by most means, the first two parts are the same. The third one this time is the Totem of Tiber Septim, not the Tools of Kagranach. We no longer have everything that the Dwemer stand for, but rather everything that Tiber Septim stands for. His own wish, change, ascension, and a lot of ego, just as Lorcan did. So this time, it works. There is even a theory that the Dwemer succeeded and left the mortal world altogether instead of disappearing, again because they hated the mortal world. It might be the case that anywhere that isn't here was good enough for them. This process repeats itself during the warp in the west. Same Mandela, same Numidium, same totem, just different desire based on who the hero of Daggerfall chooses. And he chose, well, all of them. The Numidium is a way of facing all the negative aspects of the world head on. It amalgamates all that is wrong with the world fundamentally, all that makes it worth ascending, and when powered by the forces that created the world, these concepts can be dealt head on, hence why the title, Prime Gestalt. In doing so, violence is required. Some think that the Numidium 2 is a wrong walking way because of this reason. I disagree with that. Everyone from Vivek, Mankar Cameron, Sotha Seal, and everyone else who is spitting facts about this franchise in confusing ways says that errors and doubt are essential in obtaining the truth. Challenging your ideas and doubting them to the point where they evolve is the violence that the Numidium causes and provides. It is necessary. If you can't face the world head on for what it is, how are you gonna see its universal, ideal form? That's CHIM, by the way. I think that Sotha Seal in The Truth in Sequence speaks very elegantly about the Numidium. Speak not of dwarves, child of the tribunal. The simple clockworks of the Dwemer pale before the sublime machinery of Sotha Seal. Let Dumax Leman be a silent one. Let his hissing tomb stay buried. Let his automata rust and crumble, for his was the greatest failure, driven by Lorcan's great lie and churlish pride. His is a tale of woe and terror, and those that pursue his ugly mouth shall pay a great price in blood. Hear the words in sequence, followers of Set. Intention dictates the worth of a machine, but most profane is this, the walking horror that bears the name NM, the brass tower of vanity, the mindless guardian of the Nern Prior. And then he gives the Numidium what I think is the most fitting name for the Numidium, the God Puzzle. It has to be solved, but in order for it to be solved, it has to first begin from a point where it's wrong. And finally, how shall we describe the Numidium in one sentence? Oh god, good question actually. Maybe it would be something like this. A machine designed to be an intermediary between people and the mortal world, made for the purposes of overcoming the world by defeating its negative aspects. Yeah, I think this is as good as I can make it be. Here is the full list, now that we explored all of them. Of course, everything I said here is correct, and it is definitely not the case that every few months I find mistakes in my previous videos. But in a way, that's the point of it. This is why it's so difficult to make a wiki page about the 6 walking ways. If there are things in this video that you disagree with, let me know in the comments. I read the vast majority of them. Maybe, if you're spitting facts, you will even get a pin. I might even respond to you with one of these. I am glad that there was so much new stuff to talk about. When I was cooking this video in my head, I thought, oh god, I'm just gonna be making the Vivek video all over again, aren't I? But I'm glad that there was so much to talk about outside the sermons themselves. We even got a rare ESOW. Now let me tell you, these are getting rarer and rarer by the day. Thank you for watching this video. It means the orbis to me. Please don't be too mean in the comments. Just because I talked a lot about violence, that doesn't mean that I endorse it in any way, shape or form. Outside of fiction, of course. Thank you and bye bye. I just know that the day after I publish this video, I'm gonna remember something that throws at least a portion of what I just said out into the dumps.